The little black girl hid behind a stack of seized crates, calling the biker as heavy boots approached the barrier. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. The sun had just begun to dip below the horizon, casting an orange glow across the abandoned warehouse district. In the distance, the sound of heavy boots echoed across the cracked pavement, growing louder with every passing second. Behind a stack of seized crates, a little black girl pressed herself into the cold metal, her breath shallow, her heart racing. Her small frame barely made a sound as she hid, trying desperately to stay hidden from the men who were looking for her. They were getting closer. She could hear the rhythmic thump of their boots as they marched, each step a reminder that they were closing in on her. She had no idea how long she had been running. It felt like hours, but it could have only been minutes. Her hands trembled as she pulled her jacket tighter around her, the chill of the evening air biting into her skin. She squeezed her eyes shut, praying that somehow, someone would hear her, someone would come to save her. She had nowhere else to turn. Her family was gone, and her stepfather had always made it clear that no one cared about her. Tears began to well up in her eyes as she tried to hold her breath, making herself as small as possible. She had to stay quiet, had to stay hidden. The men were getting closer, their voices growing louder as they called out her name, demanding that she come out. Her heart skipped a beat as one of them, a gruff voice, cursed loudly, saying they were going to find her no matter what. The words made her stomach drop, and her body shook in fear. Then, almost as if by instinct, she reached for her phone. Her hands were slick with sweat, but she managed to dial the number she had memorized by heart. There was only one person she knew could help her now. She put the phone to her ear, hoping against hope that he would pick up. Please pick up, she whispered, her voice trembling. The line clicked, and then she heard the familiar voice of the biker, a deep, calm voice that made her feel just a little bit safer. Hello, he answered, his tone filled with concern. It's me, she said, barely able to get the words out. I need your help. They're coming for me. The sound of heavy boots grew louder, and she knew they were only moments away. The biker's voice was steady, filled with determination. Don't worry. I'm on my way. The relief hit her like a wave, but it was short-lived. She could hear the men now, right on the other side of the stack of crates. Her breath caught in her throat. She could see the shadow of their figures moving just inches away. Every muscle in her body tensed as she braced herself for whatever was about to happen. She was so close to being found. And just as the first hand reached out to grab her, the roar of a motorcycle engine shattered the silence, followed by the screech of tires on asphalt. She didn't know how he had found her so quickly, but she wasn't going to question it. She could feel hope rising in her chest. The biker had come. The roar of the motorcycle engine grew louder as it barreled down the cracked asphalt of the warehouse district. The heavy boots of the men who had been searching for the little girl suddenly stopped, their heads turning towards the sound. For a split second, the men hesitated. But that hesitation was all the biker needed. With a sudden screech, the motorcycle came to a halt just feet away from the crates where the girl hid. The sound of the engine cut off, replaced by the silence of the night. The biker quickly dismounted, his leather jacket creaking as he moved. His face, obscured by a bandana, looked like something from a legend, stern, tough, and focused. He didn't waste time. He knew what had to be done. The girl peeked out from behind the crates, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and relief. She saw the biker, and for the first time since she had been running, she felt a glimmer of hope. He looked at her and nodded, as if reassuring her that everything was going to be okay. Then, without a word, he turned to face the men who had been closing in. There were 3 of them, big, imposing, and clearly not afraid to use force. But the biker didn't flinch. He didn't back down. The men stepped forward, but the biker stood his ground, his eyes narrowing. Stay away from her, he growled, his voice low but powerful. She's under my protection now. The leader of the group, a man with a scar running down the side of his face, sneered. You think you can just waltz in here and take her? He scoffed, cracking his knuckles. She's not your problem. The biker didn't respond. Instead, he reached into the pouch on his belt, pulling out a set of keys. With a swift motion, he unlocked a small compartment on his bike, revealing a shotgun. The sound of the metal clicking as it loaded was enough to make the men hesitate. They didn't expect this. They didn't think anyone would come for her. "This is your last warning," the biker said, his voice calm but filled with authority. "Walk away now, or we'll have a problem." For a moment, there was silence. The men looked at each other, unsure of what to do. They had never dealt with someone like him. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. Then, the man with the scar let out a frustrated growl. "You think we're scared of you?" he spat. "You're outnumbered, and you're alone. We can take you down." The biker didn't say anything. Instead, he took a step forward, his boots grinding against the gravel. The men took a step back. But just as the situation was about to escalate, a loud voice called out from the distance. "Leave her alone." It was the voice of the girl, but it wasn't just a cry for help. It was a command. Her voice was steady, despite the fear that still clung to her. She stepped out from behind the crates, her eyes now filled with defiance. She wasn't going to let these men hurt her any longer. She wasn't going to run anymore. The biker gave her a proud nod, his face softening for a moment. He knew. She was stronger than she realized. "It's time to go," he said to the men, his voice cool. The men exchanged a glance, and after a moment, they began to retreat. They had been defeated by the presence of the biker, by the strength of the girl's voice, and by the knowledge that they had no way of winning this fight. With a final glare, the man with the scar spat on the ground. "This isn't over," he muttered, before turning and walking away with the others. The biker waited until they were out of sight before turning back to the girl. He walked over to her slowly, his expression unreadable. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice gentle now that the danger had passed. She nodded, wiping away the tears that had started to fall. I think so," she whispered. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't come." The biker gave a small smile, his tough exterior softening just a bit. "You don't have to worry about that anymore," he said. "You're safe now." For the first time in what felt like forever, the girl allowed herself to relax. The weight of fear that had been pressing down on her for so long began to lift. She was safe. The biker had kept his promise. And for the first time, she felt a small sense of hope. As the biker turned to leave, she called out to him one last time. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The biker paused for a moment, turning his head slightly. "Stay strong," he replied, before walking back to his bike. The roar of the motorcycle engine filled the air once more, and with that, the biker was gone, disappearing into the night. But the girl knew she would never forget the man who had come to her rescue when she needed him the most. As the roar of the motorcycle faded into the distance, the girl, still standing alone in the cold night air, looked around the darkened warehouse district. The danger was gone, but the weight of everything that had happened still pressed down on her. She slowly turned and walked toward the back of the crates, her mind racing with thoughts of what she'd just survived. The sound of the motorcycle engine disappearing had felt like a lifeline, but now that it was gone, the reality of her situation began to sink in. She was alone in a place that felt foreign, far from the life she had known just hours ago. She didn't have anyone left to turn to, not really. Her mother was gone, her father never in the picture, and now, her stepfather was more of a nightmare than a protector. She hugged her arms around herself, feeling the cold seep into her bones, but not just from the temperature. She was numb in a way she couldn't explain. Just then, a sound broke her thoughts. The familiar growl of a motorcycle engine sounded in the distance, much quieter this time, but unmistakable. Her heart skipped. It was him. The biker. He was back. She had hoped she wouldn't need him again, but here he was, and somehow, it was a relief. The bike came into view, headlights cutting through the fog of the evening air. He was riding slowly this time, clearly cautious. When he saw her standing there, his pace slowed even further. The bike rolled to a gentle stop beside her. "You're still here," the biker said, his voice soft, almost like a question. She nodded, trying to smile, but it came out shaky. "I didn't know where else to go," she whispered. The biker dismounted from his bike and walked over to her. He wasn't the type to show much emotion, but there was something in his eyes now, a quiet understanding, a shared weight that he was willing to bear for her. "You're safe now," he said, his voice firm, but there was no doubt in his tone. He meant it. She looked up at him, Her eyes filled with a mix of gratitude and something else, something she couldn't quite name. Fear had gripped her so tightly for so long that she didn't know what to do with the peace she was suddenly feeling. "I don't know what to do now," she admitted, her voice cracking. "I don't have anyone left." The biker paused for a moment, considering her words. His face softened for a moment, and he put a hand on her shoulder. "You've got me," he said simply. "You've got the club." His words, though simple, were a promise, one that would be kept. He could see the weight of the girl's loneliness, the way her small body still trembled from the fear she had experienced, and he knew that what she needed most right now wasn't just protection. She needed someone who cared. "I'm not leaving you," he continued. "We'll figure it out. We always do." She nodded slowly, the tears welling up again. But this time, they were different. These weren't tears of fear or pain. They were tears of relief, of finally knowing that someone was there. The biker looked toward the horizon, where the faint glow of the streetlights barely illuminated the roads that led out of the industrial district. He was a man of few words, but he knew what needed to be done. "Let's get you out of here," he said. He led her toward his motorcycle. She hesitated for just a second, glancing back toward the shadows where the danger had once been, but it was gone now. The cold night seemed less threatening, less alone with the biker beside her. She climbed onto the back of the bike, wrapping her arms around him as he revved the engine, feeling the hum of the machine beneath her. She had no idea where they were going, but for the first time in a long while, she didn't feel like she was walking in darkness. She felt a glimmer of hope, a feeling that maybe, just maybe, things could be different. The motorcycle roared to life once again, and as they sped away from the warehouse district, she knew that she was no longer alone. The biker wasn't just a protector. He was the beginning of something new, something she didn't yet understand but was willing to trust. She was safe, for now, and that was enough. The miles passed by in the quiet hum of the engine and the cool night air, but it was a different kind of quiet than before. This was the calm after the storm, the first breath of a new chapter that, despite everything, was filled with possibilities. The motorcycle engine rumbled steadily as they rode through the quiet streets, the soft hum of the tires against the road filling the otherwise silent night. The girl clung to the biker, her arms wrapped tightly around his waist, as the wind rushed past them. For the first time in what felt like forever, she felt a sense of calm, even though everything about the world around her still felt uncertain. She had no idea where they were going, but she knew she couldn't stay in the warehouse district any longer. As they passed through the city's outskirts, the lights grew dimmer, and the sound of the engine became the only thing that could be heard. The biker, with his steady hands on the handlebars, glanced back to make sure she was holding on. "You doing okay back there?" he asked, his voice cutting through the wind. She nodded, her face pressed against his back, trying to keep her tears from falling. "Yeah, I'm okay," she whispered, though she wasn't entirely sure if she was. The past few days had been a blur of fear, confusion, and pain. She had never felt so alone in her life. But now, with the biker beside her, she could feel a flicker of hope. "We're almost there," the biker said after a while, his voice calm and reassuring. The girl sat up a little straighter, trying to focus on the road ahead. She still had no idea where they were going, but she trusted him. After all, he had kept his promise to protect her. They turned onto a smaller road, and the pavement became rougher, the bike jolting slightly with each bump. It wasn't long before they arrived at a large, old house on the outskirts of town. The house was surrounded by tall trees, and the driveway was overgrown with weeds. The girl looked around, feeling a mix of curiosity and unease. "Where are we?" she asked, her voice small. "This is the place," the biker replied, pulling the bike to a stop in front of the house. "This is where you'll be safe for now." He helped her off the bike and guided her to the front door. As they approached, the door opened, and a man stepped out to greet them. He was older, with a grizzled beard and a weathered face, but there was a kindness in his eyes. "Jake, you made it," the man said, his voice gruff but warm. The biker, whose name was Jake, gave a slight nod. "This is her," he said, looking at the girl. "She's safe here." The man stepped aside, allowing them to enter the house. The girl hesitated for a moment before stepping inside, her eyes scanning the unfamiliar surroundings. The house smelled like wood and leather, and the walls were lined with old photographs and mementos. It felt different from anything she had ever known. "This is Hank," Jake said, introducing the man. "He's a friend. You're safe here, kid. Nobody's going to hurt you." Hank nodded in agreement, a gentle smile on his face. "I'll make sure of that," he said. The girl nodded, her hands still trembling slightly as she looked around. It was a strange feeling, being in a place that wasn't full of fear or tension. But she couldn't shake the feeling that everything was still up in the air, that the danger wasn't over. "You can stay here as long as you need," Jake continued. "We'll figure things out. But for now, you need to rest." He led her to a small room at the back of the house, where a simple bed was made up with fresh sheets. The girl stood in the doorway for a moment, taking it all in. It was quiet, peaceful, and for the first time, she felt like she could breathe. Jake stood in the doorway, his arms crossed. "If you need anything, just let me know," he said, his voice calm. "We're here for you." The girl gave him a small, uncertain smile, nodding as she stepped inside. As the door closed behind her, she sat down on the bed, looking around at the unfamiliar room. It felt strange to be in a place where she wasn't hiding, where she wasn't in danger. But the sense of safety that she felt here was something she hadn't known in a long time. She lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling. It was hard to believe that just hours ago, she had been running, terrified, with no one to turn to. Now, she had Jake, and this strange new place to call safe, at least for the time being. She closed her eyes, finally allowing herself to relax. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Slowly, her breathing steadied, and she drifted into a restless sleep, the sounds of the night outside and the warmth of the room offering her a brief respite from the storm that had been her life. Jake stood outside the door for a moment, his mind racing. He knew this wasn't over. He knew there would be more challenges ahead. But for tonight, the girl was safe. That was enough for now. The following morning, the sun's early rays filtered through the thick trees surrounding the house, casting a warm glow over the quiet, secluded property. The girl, still resting in the small room, stirred slightly as the first light of day touched her face. She hadn't slept much the night before, her mind racing with thoughts of the events that had led her here. But for the first time in a long while, she felt something she hadn't felt in years: peace. The bed was simple, but it was comfortable, and the small room felt safe. Safe was a feeling she had almost forgotten. She sat up, rubbing her eyes, her body sore from the constant tension of the past few days. The nightmares hadn't come, at least not yet, and for that, she was grateful. She heard the sounds of movement outside, the low murmur of voices. Jake's voice, deep and steady, could be heard clearly. He wasn't alone. She stood up slowly, her feet touching the cold wooden floor. She walked quietly to the window, parting the thin curtains just enough to peek out. She could see Jake talking to Hank, standing near the old truck parked outside. There was something serious in their conversation. The sight of them standing together, looking like they were making plans, gave her a sense of security, but she still felt a lingering anxiety. The reality was, she wasn't truly safe yet. The men who had been chasing her were still out there, somewhere. As much as Jake tried to reassure her, she knew that it wasn't over. There were still too many unknowns. She needed to know what was happening next. She took a deep breath, pushed the curtain aside, and opened the door, stepping out into the cool morning air. The ground beneath her bare feet was rough, and she winced as she walked toward the two men. Jake saw her approach, and his face softened when he saw her. He waved her over. "Morning," he said, his voice calm but still carrying that edge of authority. "How'd you sleep?" "Better," she replied, her voice still a bit shaky. She stopped a few feet away, her eyes flicking from Jake to Hank. Hank, who had been standing with his arms crossed, looked at her with a kind but serious expression. "How are you holding up?" he asked. "You okay?" The girl nodded, though she wasn't entirely sure she was. "I'm all right, I guess," she said softly. "Just trying to figure out what happens next." Jake exchanged a glance with Hank. "We've been talking," Jake said. "We need to figure out where to go from here. We can't stay here forever, and we've got to make sure you're safe." "But what if they find me?" she asked, her voice cracking slightly. "What if they come back for me?" Jake stepped forward, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We won't let them," he said firmly. "They don't know where we are, and we'll make sure it stays that way. You're not alone anymore." Hank nodded in agreement. "We'll figure it out. We'll make sure they don't come after you again." But the girl could still feel the weight of the fear pressing down on her. She wasn't sure how long they could keep her hidden here. She wanted to believe them, but the doubt was still there. The man with the scar, the ones who had been chasing her, they wouldn't stop. She could feel it in her bones. I don't know how long we can hide, she said, her voice barely a whisper. What happens if they come for me again? Jake's expression softened, his face showing a rare moment of vulnerability. If they come for you, we fight, he said. You've got us. You've got the club. We don't back down, and we don't let anyone hurt one of our own. The girl looked at him, his words sinking in. For the first time in a long while, she felt something stirred deep inside her, a flicker of hope, maybe even a spark of defiance. She wasn't sure if she was ready to believe it yet, but something about Jake's unwavering confidence made her want to. We can't let them win, Jake added, his voice steady. And we won't. She nodded, though she wasn't sure if she truly understood what it would take to fight back. She was just a scared girl, alone in a world that had never been kind to her. But maybe, just maybe, this could be the start of something different. Maybe she didn't have to face it alone. She looked at Jake, then at Hank, her heart still racing with uncertainty. What do we do now, she asked. Hank stepped forward, his face serious. First, we lay low. We figure out who's behind this, and how they know where you are. But we can't make any moves too soon. We need to be smart about this. Jake nodded. We'll handle it. You just need to rest for now. Let us take care of the rest. The girl took a deep breath, trying to calm the whirlwind of thoughts in her mind. She wasn't sure if this was really the safety she had been looking for, but it was the closest she had gotten in a long time. And for now, that had to be enough. The next few days passed in a blur of quiet uncertainty. The girl, still adjusting to this new sense of safety, spent most of her time in the room that had been set up for her. The house, though small and old, felt like a sanctuary compared to the cold, hostile world she had left behind. Jake and Hank were always around, checking in on her, making sure she had everything she needed, but they never pressured her to talk. She appreciated that, even though the silence often felt heavy. They didn't ask about her past, about her mother, her stepfather, or why she had been running. They knew that some things had to heal on their own, in their own time. On the morning of the fourth day, Jake knocked on her door. His usual calm expression was replaced with a hint of urgency. We need to talk, he said. The girl, who had been sitting on the bed, looked up at him, her heart skipping a beat. Was it time to leave again? To move on? The thought made her stomach twist. She stood up, walking toward him slowly. What's going on? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jake stepped into the room, shutting the door behind him. He looked at her with the same intensity he always had, but today there was something different in his eyes, something that made her nervous. We've got a lead on who's behind all of this, he said, his voice low. We think we know who's been looking for you. The girl felt her heart race. The fear that had been dormant in her for the past few days surged back to the surface. Who? She asked, her voice tight. Jake's face was grim. It's your stepfather. The words hung in the air, heavy and cold. The girl froze, her eyes widening. She had always known he was dangerous, but hearing Jake say it out loud made it feel real in a way that she couldn't ignore. She opened her mouth to speak, but found she had no words. After all these years, after everything he had done to her, the idea that he was still hunting her down was almost too much to bear. Jake stepped closer, placing a hand on her shoulder. I know this is a lot, he said, his voice gentle but firm. But we can't just sit here. We have to act. We have to make sure you're safe for good. The girl swallowed hard, her throat dry. She wanted to tell him to leave it, to let her just disappear and never deal with it again. But she knew deep down that wasn't an option. Not anymore. She nodded slowly. What do we do? Jake's eyes softened for a moment, but the determination in them never wavered. We're going to take the fight to him, he said. We'll find out where he's been hiding, and we'll make sure he knows he can't just hurt you again. He's going to learn that he messed with the wrong people. The girl felt a chill run down her spine at the thought of confronting her stepfather again. She hadn't seen him in years, but the memories of him were still vivid, still sharp. The thought of him finding her again, of him showing up at this house, made her want to run far away, and never look back. But Jake's words echoed in her mind. She wasn't alone anymore. She had a chance to fight back, to take control of her life in a way she never had before. She looked up at Jake, her eyes filled with resolve. Okay, she said, her voice stronger than it had been in days. Let's do it. Jake smiled, the corner of his mouth turning up slightly. I knew you had it in you. Over the next few hours, the mood in the house shifted. Jake and Hank worked together, making phone calls, gathering information. The girl didn't know exactly what they were doing, but she could see the determination in their actions. They weren't just going to wait for her stepfather to find them. They were going to track him down first. The girl sat quietly in the living room, the weight of the situation sinking in. She was about to face the man who had ruined her life, the man who had made her believe that she was worthless. The thought filled her with dread, but it also ignited something deep inside her. The fear was still there, but so was something else, a strength she hadn't known she had. Jake and Hank returned after what felt like hours. We've got a location, Jake said, his voice steady. We know where he's been staying. We're heading out soon. The girl stood up, feeling a mix of fear and adrenaline course through her. She had no idea what to expect, but she knew one thing for sure. She wasn't going to let him control her life any longer. As they prepared to leave, Jake turned to her one last time. Are you ready? He asked. She nodded, taking a deep breath. I'm ready. With that, the three of them walked out of the house, the door closing softly behind them. The girl's heart raced as they made their way to the bikes, the wind picking up around them. She didn't know what would happen next, but she knew this was the first step in taking her life back. She wasn't running anymore. She was going to fight, and she had the strength to do it. The ride to the location was long and tense, the roar of the motorcycle engines cutting through the night air as they moved through the streets. The girl sat behind Jake, gripping him tightly, her heart racing with every mile they covered. She had no idea what to expect when they arrived, but she knew one thing. This was it. This was the moment she would face the man who had haunted her for so long. As they turned down a narrow road lined with old buildings and overgrown grass, the house came into view. It was run down, a two-story structure with peeling paint and a sagging roof. The kind of place someone would hide in when they wanted to disappear. Jake slowed the bike, pulling it to a stop just down the street from the house. He signaled for Hank, who had been following closely behind, to stop as well. The girl took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. She didn't know if she was ready for this, but she couldn't back down now. This was the only way. Jake turned to her, his face serious but supportive. Stay close, he said. We'll go in together. I'll be right by your side. She nodded, her throat tight. I'm ready, she whispered, though she wasn't sure if she truly was. As they approached the house, Jake and Hank took the lead. The girl followed behind them, keeping a safe distance but never taking her eyes off the door. The closer they got, the more her pulse quickened, the fear that had been buried inside her rising to the surface. She could hear her heart thudding in her ears, the sound almost deafening in the quiet night. They reached the door, and Jake knocked sharply. A long pause followed. Then, the sound of footsteps from inside, slow and deliberate, as if the person on the other side knew who was there and what was coming. The door creaked open, revealing a man who was vaguely familiar to the girl, though his face was older, hardened by time. It was him, her stepfather. He looked at her with a mix of surprise and anger, as if he hadn't expected her to show up, but deep down, he had always known this moment was coming. His eyes scanned her for a moment, his expression shifting. I should have known you'd show up here, eventually, he said, his voice low and cold. The girl stood her ground, despite the wave of fear crashing over her. She had spent years running from him, from his abuse, but now she wasn't running anymore. You won't hurt me again, she said, her voice surprisingly steady. Jake stepped forward, standing between her and her stepfather. You need to leave her alone, he said, his voice calm but firm. You've done enough damage. Her stepfather sneered, his lip curling in disdain. Who are you to tell me what to do? She's mine. She's nothing but a troublemaker. Jake didn't flinch, his expression unwavering. Not anymore. She's under my protection now. You're not welcome here. There was a long pause as the man considered his options. His gaze flicked from Jake to the girl, a mix of hatred and frustration in his eyes. You think you can just take her from me? He spat, his hand reaching for something inside the door. The girl's heart skipped a beat, and she took a step back, instinctively reaching for Jake. But Jake was quick. In one fluid motion, he stepped in front of her, his body blocking hers from any potential danger. Don't make this worse, he warned. You're outnumbered, and you're not getting away with this. Her stepfather hesitated, his hand still hovering over the door. For a moment, There was an uneasy silence, the tension thick in the air. The girl held her breath, her fingers gripping the edge of Jake's jacket. Then, her stepfather seemed to snap, his anger boiling over. He lunged forward, attempting to push past Jake, but Hank was already there, grabbing him by the arm and forcing him back. "You're not going anywhere," Hank said, his voice firm, his grip like iron. The man struggled, but he was no match for Hank's strength. "This is your last chance," Jake said, his voice cold. "Leave, and never come near her again. If you don't, we'll make sure you never hurt anyone again." The man, still struggling against Hank's grip, realized he was trapped. His face twisted with rage, but there was a flicker of fear in his eyes now, a realization that he had lost control. Slowly, he backed away, his hands held up in a half-hearted surrender. "This isn't over," he muttered, before turning and disappearing into the house, slamming the door behind him. The girl watched him go, her heart still pounding in her chest. She felt a mix of relief and confusion. It was over for now, but she knew this wouldn't be the last time she saw him. But for the first time in a long time, she felt like she had won. Jake turned to her, his expression softening. "It's over," he said, his voice full of reassurance. "He won't bother you again. We won." The girl nodded slowly, feeling a sense of pride welling up inside her. She wasn't the same scared girl who had run away. She was stronger now, and with Jake and Hank by her side, she knew she could face whatever came next. She had taken control of her life, and no one was going to take it from her again. The next few days passed in a blur of adrenaline and uncertainty. After the confrontation with her stepfather, the girl felt a strange sense of calm, though the fear still lingered deep inside her. She had hoped that by confronting him, she could finally move on, but now, the reality of the situation was setting in. She couldn't forget what he had done, and the scars he had left on her were still fresh, even if they weren't visible to anyone else. Jake and Hank continued to stay by her side, always vigilant, always ready for whatever came next. They kept a close watch on the house, making sure no one was following them, no one was planning another attack. Every day felt like a ticking clock, and the girl wasn't sure how much longer she could stay in one place. The threat wasn't over, not by a long shot. One evening, after dinner, Jake sat down next to her. "We need to talk," he said, his voice serious. She looked up at him, her heart skipping a beat. "About what?" she asked, her voice shaky. "About what comes next," he said. "We've taken care of your stepfather for now, but we can't keep running forever. We need to figure out what you want to do next." The girl paused, staring down at the table. She didn't know what she wanted to do. All she knew was that she couldn't go back to the life she had before. She couldn't go back to living in fear, wondering if her stepfather was lurking around the corner. She couldn't live like that anymore. "I don't know," she said softly. "I just want to be free. I want to feel like I'm not constantly looking over my shoulder." Jake's expression softened. "You are free now," he said gently. "You don't have to live in fear anymore. We'll figure this out together. But you have to trust us." The girl looked up at him, seeing the sincerity in his eyes. She had trusted him before, and he hadn't let her down. Maybe, just maybe, she could trust him now. "I don't know if I'm ready for all of this," she admitted, her voice small. "But I want to try." Jake smiled, a rare, warm smile. "That's all I'm asking for," he said. "We'll take it one step at a time." The girl nodded, feeling a small spark of hope. It wasn't much, but it was a start. As the days passed, Jake and Hank made arrangements for the girl to start over. They found a safe place for her to stay, away from the city, far from the memories of her old life. It was a small town, quiet and peaceful, where no one would recognize her. It was everything she needed, a fresh start. But even as she prepared to leave the house that had become her temporary home, a part of her hesitated. Could she really start over? Could she leave everything behind and build a new life for herself? She wasn't sure, but she knew one thing for certain. She couldn't go back to the way things were. And so, with the help of Jake and Hank, she packed her things, ready to take the first step toward a new life. The drive to the new town was long, but the girl hardly noticed. She was lost in her thoughts, thinking about the life that lay ahead of her. For the first time in years, she felt a glimmer of excitement. She wasn't sure what the future held, but for once, she felt like she had control. She wasn't running anymore. She was choosing this path. As they arrived at the new place, the girl's heart fluttered in her chest. The town was small, with wide, tree-lined streets, and old brick buildings that seemed to have stories of their own. It was everything she had imagined it would be, peaceful, calm, and free from the chaos she had left behind. Jake pulled into the driveway of a small house at the edge of town, the one they had secured for her. It wasn't much, but it was enough. It was hers. She stepped out of the car, taking in the sight of the house, the quiet street, and the promise of a new beginning. "This is your home now," Jake said, his voice low and steady. "You can stay here as long as you need to. You're not alone anymore." The girl looked at him, a smile tugging at her lips. For the first time in what felt like forever, she felt like she belonged somewhere. She wasn't alone. She wasn't afraid. She was free. The next few days were a whirlwind of settling in, arranging the house, meeting the neighbors, and starting to build a new routine. The girl began to feel like she was truly starting over. There were still moments of doubt, of fear creeping in, but they were less frequent. She had Jake and Hank to lean on, and she had a place to call her own. It was a slow process, but she was learning to trust again, to believe that she could have a future outside of the fear she had been living in for so long. And though the road ahead was uncertain, one thing was clear: she was no longer a victim of her past. She was taking control of her life, one step at a time. The days in the small town began to blend together, each one quietly passing, bringing the girl closer to the life she had always dreamed of. She woke up early each morning, the sun casting soft rays through the windows of her new home. The house was modest, but it was hers. The weight of the past was still there, lingering just below the surface, but each day she spent in this new place felt like a step further away from the nightmare she had escaped. There were moments when the fear would creep back in, when the quiet of the town would remind her of how much she had lost, how much she still had to rebuild. But the support from Jake and Hank kept her grounded. They checked in on her daily, making sure she was adjusting, offering comfort and reassurance. Jake, especially, was a constant presence. He would stop by often, bringing her small things to help make the house feel more like a home: fresh flowers for the table, a few new kitchen utensils, things that made her smile, even if only for a moment. She had come to rely on their friendship, and though she had never expected it, they had become the family she never thought she would have. One afternoon, as the girl was walking into town to grab some groceries, she noticed a flyer on a community bulletin board. It was a help-wanted sign for a local cafe. The job seemed simple enough: waiting tables, helping with orders, nothing too demanding. She hesitated for a moment, staring at the flyer. Part of her wanted to walk away. She wasn't sure she was ready for something as normal as a job, not after everything that had happened. But another part of her, the part that had started to trust again, wondered if it might be the fresh start she needed. She needed something to fill the days, something to give her a sense of purpose. And maybe, just maybe, it was time to stop hiding from the world. She took the flyer, her heart racing, and walked toward the cafe. The door chimed as she stepped inside, and the warm scent of coffee and baked goods filled the air. The cafe was cozy, with wooden tables and mismatched chairs, giving it a homey, welcoming feel. Behind the counter stood a woman, probably in her mid-30s, with a bright smile and an apron tied around her waist. "Hi there," the woman said as she saw the girl walk in. "Can I help you?" The girl took a deep breath, forcing herself to speak. "I saw the help wanted sign outside. I was wondering if the position is still available." The woman looked her up and down for a moment, assessing her with a keen but not unkind gaze. "We're always looking for help," she said, her tone friendly. "Can I take your name?" The girl hesitated, her mind racing for a moment. She wasn't used to giving out her name to strangers. But then she realized that she couldn't keep running forever. She needed to start living again. It's Lily," she said, her voice steady despite the nerves. The woman smiled warmly. "Nice to meet you, Lily. Why don't you have a seat? I'll grab an application, and we can chat for a bit." Lily nodded, feeling a mixture of excitement and fear as she sat down at one of the tables. As the woman walked away to grab the application, Lily's mind wandered. Could this really be happening? Was she really about to get a job, something normal, something people her age were supposed to be doing? She had never allowed herself to dream of a life like this. Her past had been a constant weight around her neck, dragging her down with every step. But now, with the cafe and the new town, things seemed different. Maybe she wasn't so far gone after all. When the woman returned with the application, She handed it over with a smile. Here you go. Take your time, and when you're ready, just let me know. Lily took the form, feeling the paper crinkle in her hands. She glanced down at the questions: name, address, work experience, references. The questions seemed simple enough, but to Lily, they were a mountain to climb. She hadn't had a job before. She hadn't needed one. Not when she had been running from her stepfather. The girl's hand trembled slightly as she picked up the pen, but she took a deep breath and started to fill it out. When she finished, she handed it back to the woman, her heart pounding. All set, Lily said, trying to keep her voice steady. The woman took the form and glanced over it quickly, then looked up at Lily with a smile. I'll be in touch soon, Lily, she said. Thanks for applying. Lily smiled back, her stomach doing flips as she walked out of the cafe. She had done it. She had taken the first step towards something new, something real. It wasn't much, but it was a start. The road ahead was still uncertain, and she wasn't sure what would happen next. But for the first time in a long time, Lily felt like she had a chance at something more. She wasn't just a victim anymore. She wasn't running. She was starting over, and maybe that was enough. The next few weeks passed with a rhythm Lily was slowly learning to embrace. After the tension of her past life, every day felt like a small victory. The job at the cafe, though modest, became something that grounded her. It was simple work, serving coffee, wiping down tables, helping the occasional customer, but it was hers. It was a routine she could follow, and for the first time in a long while, she felt like she had purpose. Every morning, she woke up early to start the day, the same quiet sunrise greeting her as she walked to the cafe. The small town, with its friendly faces and slower pace, had become her sanctuary. Jake and Hank continued to check in, offering their support, but they seemed content to let her live her life without hovering. They knew, just as she did, that she needed to take ownership of her future, one step at a time. The cafe owner, a woman named Emma, became a mentor of sorts. Emma was kind, patient, and never rushed Lily, allowing her to learn at her own pace. You're doing great, Lily, Emma would say with a smile, her approval making Lily's chest swell with pride. It wasn't much, but the small compliments made her feel seen, something she had longed for when her world had felt so small and dark. One afternoon, as Lily was wiping down a counter, a familiar figure walked through the door. It was a man she had never met, but his face was strikingly familiar. He looked around the cafe before his eyes locked onto her. He had an intense, determined look, and his presence sent a small jolt through her. He was tall, with dark features and a calm but determined expression, and the moment he stepped closer, she knew. It was her stepfather. Lily froze, her blood running cold. Her breath caught in her throat, and her heart began to pound in her chest. For a split second, it felt like time stopped. Her mind raced. What was he doing here? Had he been watching her? Did he know? She hadn't seen him in weeks, not since the confrontation with Jake and Hank, and she had convinced herself that he was gone, that he would never find her again. But here he was, standing in front of her, like a nightmare come to life. Her first instinct was to run, to flee, but she stayed rooted to the spot. She had fought so hard to get here, to build this life. She wasn't going to let him destroy it now. She swallowed hard and took a step back, trying to regain control. Can I help you? She asked, her voice steady but her heart hammering. The man's lips curled into a smirk, but his eyes were cold. I think you know exactly why I'm here, he said in a low, menacing voice. Lily's stomach churned. She wanted to turn and run, but something inside her told her to stay. She couldn't show him fear. Not now. Not ever again. I'm not the same person I was, she said, her voice unwavering. I'm done with you. I'm not your victim anymore. The man's smirk faltered for a brief moment, but then he straightened up, his expression hardening again. You think you can just walk away from me? You're mine, Lily. You'll always be mine. His words were like a slap to the face, but Lily didn't flinch. She had spent too many years living in fear, too many years letting him control her. Not anymore. She took a deep breath and stepped back toward the counter, keeping a small distance between them. You don't control me, she said firmly, her eyes locking onto his. I'm free, and I'm not going back to the life you tried to steal from me. The man's eyes darkened, and he stepped forward, but before he could say another word, Emma appeared from behind the counter. Is there a problem here? She asked, her voice calm but firm. The man's gaze shifted to Emma, and for a moment, he seemed to reconsider. He looked at Lily one last time, his jaw clenched, before he turned and walked out of the cafe. Lily stood there, still in shock, as the door closed behind him. Her heart was racing, her mind still processing what had just happened. She had confronted him. She had stood up to him. It felt like the world was spinning around her, but something deep inside her knew that she had just crossed a line. She had taken control. She wasn't that scared girl anymore. Emma came over and placed a hand on her shoulder. "Are you okay?" she asked softly. Lily nodded, her voice shaky but strong. "Yeah, I am." The fear was still there, but now, it was just a shadow, a distant memory. For the first time in a long while, Lily felt like she could breathe again. She wasn't running anymore. And this time, she wasn't backing down. The days after the confrontation with her stepfather were filled with a new sense of strength for Lily. The cafe had become her safe haven, a place where she could focus on something normal, something stable. She still felt the weight of the past pressing down on her at times, but each passing day, she found herself growing a little more resilient. The fear she had once carried like a heavy chain around her heart was slowly dissolving. Emma, the cafe owner, had been more than just a boss. She had become a mentor and, in a way, a friend. She could see the fear that still clung to Lily at times, but she never pushed. She allowed Lily to take her time, offering gentle words of encouragement when necessary. "You've got this, Lily," Emma would say. "Take it one day at a time." It was advice that resonated with her more than she ever expected. As the weeks went on, Lily settled into a routine. Her work at the cafe became easier, the tasks more familiar. It wasn't just the job that gave her a sense of purpose, though. It was the people she met, the small connections she was starting to make. The town, which once seemed so foreign and intimidating, was beginning to feel like home. One evening, after closing the cafe, Lily was walking home, the cool night air wrapping around her like a soft blanket. She had learned to appreciate the quiet, the simplicity of the small town. As she walked, she noticed a familiar figure leaning against the fence near her house. It was Jake. He was waiting for her, his posture relaxed but his eyes scanning the street, as if he was always on guard. When he saw her, his face softened into a smile. "Hey," he said as she approached. "How's it going?" "Good," she replied, giving him a small smile. "Really good." He pushed off from the fence and fell into step beside her as they walked toward her house. "I'm glad to hear that," he said. There was a pause before he added, "I've been meaning to talk to you about something." Lily glanced at him, her curiosity piqued. "What's up?" Jake seemed to hesitate for a moment, his eyes focused ahead as they walked. "I know things have been tough, and I know you're doing your best to move forward, but I just wanted to remind you that you don't have to do it all alone." Lily stopped walking, looking at him with a furrowed brow. "What do you mean?" "I mean that you've got a support system here," Jake said, turning to face her. "You don't have to carry everything on your shoulders. We're here for you, no matter what." Lily felt a lump form in her throat. She had gotten used to being alone, to relying on herself, and only herself. The idea of trusting others fully was still difficult for her, but hearing Jake say those words made something inside her shift. She had never truly had a support system. Her mother had always been distant, and her stepfather had made sure she believed no one would ever care about her. To hear Jake, someone who had no obligation to her, offer that kind of reassurance, was something she wasn't sure she could process yet. "Thanks," she said quietly, looking down at the ground. I don't know if I'm ready for all that, but it means a lot that you're here." Jake nodded, his expression understanding. "I get it," he said. "It's a lot to ask, but just know that when you are ready, we've got your back." They stood there for a moment, the quiet of the night enveloping them. Lily felt her heart settle, the weight of the past few weeks starting to lift, even if just a little. She wasn't ready to let go of all her fears, but she was starting to understand that it was okay to trust, to lean on others. She didn't have to do it all alone. Jake gave her a small smile and clapped her gently on the shoulder. "Take care of yourself, all right? And I'll see you tomorrow." "Yeah," she said, returning his smile. "See you tomorrow." As he walked away, Lily stood there for a moment, watching him go. The feeling of loneliness that had haunted her for so long was starting to fade. Maybe she wasn't alone anymore. Maybe she didn't have to carry the weight of her past forever. Maybe, just maybe, she could let people in and build something better for herself. The road ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, Lily felt like she was heading in the right direction. As the days continued to pass in the quiet town, Lily found herself becoming more at ease. The daily routine of working at the cafe was grounding, and she had begun to feel like she belonged, even if just a little. Her past, though still a shadow, seemed farther away with each passing moment. She spent her days serving coffee, chatting with the friendly locals, and going home each night to the small house she had come to love. It wasn't perfect, but it was hers, and that meant everything. Jake and Hank kept their distance, but they were always there when she needed them. The support they offered was silent but constant, like the steady hum of the town around her. They never pushed her to open up, but they made it clear that they were there to help if she ever needed it. One afternoon, as she was walking back from the cafe after a long shift, she noticed a man standing by the side of the road. He was tall, with broad shoulders, and though his posture was relaxed, there was something about him that made her pause. He wasn't a local, that much was obvious. As she got closer, she realized who it was. Her stepfather. Her heart skipped a beat. The fear that she had been trying to bury for so long flared back to life. She wanted to turn around, to run away and never look back. But something in her stopped her. She wasn't that scared girl anymore. She had fought too hard to get here. She couldn't run now. She stopped in her tracks, her eyes locking onto his. His face remained cold, emotionless, but there was a glint of recognition in his eyes. "Lily," he said, his voice low, almost casual. "I thought I'd find you here." Her stomach turned, but she forced herself to stand tall. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice steady despite the rush of panic inside her. "I came to see how you're doing," he said, taking a step forward. "I've been worried about you." Lily took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. "You don't get to worry about me," she said firmly. "You lost that right a long time ago." His eyes narrowed at her words, but he didn't move any closer. "I see you've gotten comfortable," he said, his tone dripping with disdain. "Living in this little town, playing house, pretending like everything's fine." "I'm not pretending," Lily replied, her voice cold now. "I'm living my life. Something you never let me do." The man's jaw clenched, but he didn't respond right away. For a moment, the two of them stood in silence, the tension between them thick in the air. Finally, he spoke again. "I won't let you get away with this, you know," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "You're mine, and I'll make sure you remember that." Lily felt her heart race, but she refused to let him see her fear. "You don't control me anymore," she said, her voice unwavering. "I'm done running, and I'm done being your victim." For a long moment, he just stared at her, as if weighing her words. Then, with a scoff, he turned and began to walk away. "This isn't over," he muttered under his breath. Lily stood there for a moment, watching him disappear down the road. Her heart was still pounding in her chest, but she wasn't afraid anymore. She had faced him. She had stood her ground. And that meant something. She didn't know what would happen next, but she knew one thing for sure. She wasn't going to let him control her life ever again. The sound of footsteps behind her made her turn. It was Jake. He had been watching from a distance, but he must have known something was wrong when he saw her standing there. "Are you okay?" he asked gently, concern in his voice. Lily nodded, though she didn't trust her own voice. She felt like she had just been through a storm, but she wasn't shattered. She was still standing. "I'm fine," she said, her voice steady. "It's over. He won't hurt me again." Jake didn't say anything, but he gave her a reassuring nod. "You're strong, Lily. I knew you had it in you." She smiled faintly, grateful for his words, but the weight of what had just happened still lingered. "I'm not running anymore," she said softly, more to herself than to him. "I'm not afraid anymore." Jake's smile widened, and he put a hand on her shoulder. "You don't have to be," he said. "You've got us. We've got your back." For the first time, Lily allowed herself to believe it. The fear that had ruled her for so long was starting to lose its grip. She had faced her past. She had taken control of her own life. And she wasn't alone. As they walked back to her house, the weight on her shoulders felt a little lighter. The road ahead was still uncertain, but she knew that whatever came next, she was ready to face it. She had her future in her hands now, and for the first time in her life, that was enough. The days that followed were quieter, more peaceful, and for the first time in years, Lily felt like she was in control of her own life. The weight of her past still lingered, but it didn't have the same hold over her anymore. She had faced her fears, stood up to her stepfather, and finally accepted that she had the right to live her life on her own terms. She continued working at the cafe, settling into a rhythm, and with each day that passed, she became more confident, more sure of herself. She didn't feel the constant anxiety that used to grip her heart, the fear that someone might come for her, that her past might catch up with her. She was learning to trust again, to trust the people around her, and to trust herself. Jake and Hank remained her steady support, always checking in on her, offering their friendship and encouragement. Though she didn't need them as much as she once had, they were still there, like a safety net. They respected her space, but they made sure she knew that she wasn't alone. One evening, as the cafe was closing, Emma approached her with a bright smile. "Lily, I've been thinking," she said. "You've really settled in here, and you've been doing such a great job. There's a position opening up at the local diner, and I think you'd be perfect for it. If you're interested, I'd be happy to put in a good word for you." Lily's heart raced as she processed Emma's words. A new opportunity? Something outside of the cafe? Something that would challenge her and push her even further out of her comfort zone? She hadn't thought about moving on, but the idea stirred something inside her. "You really think I'd be good for it?" she asked, her voice tentative. "I do," Emma said with a smile. "You're reliable, hardworking, and you've got that spark. I think you'd do well there." Lily felt a small flutter in her chest. She had been so focused on just getting by, surviving each day, that she hadn't even considered what might come next. Now, with this new opportunity before her, she felt like the world was opening up again. She had been running from everything for so long, afraid to move forward. But now, for the first time, she was thinking about her future. "I'll think about it," she said, a smile tugging at the corner of her lips. Emma nodded, her eyes warm. "Take your time. No rush." Over the next few days, Lily thought a lot about the diner job. It was a step forward, a chance to push herself, to take on something new. She could feel the weight of her past trying to pull her back, whispering that she wasn't ready, that she would fail. But she had been wrong about herself before, hadn't she? She had thought she was broken, lost, but now she was starting to realize that she was stronger than she had ever given herself credit for. When she made the decision to go for the job, it felt like another small victory, another step toward reclaiming her life. She told Emma the news, and Emma's face lit up with a genuine smile. "I knew you'd go for it," she said, her voice full of pride. The next few weeks flew by, and soon Lily was starting her new job at the diner. The first few shifts were tough. She was learning new things, figuring out the ropes, but the challenge excited her. She realized that she was capable of more than she had ever imagined. As she walked home after her first shift, the cool night air against her skin, she felt a sense of accomplishment that she hadn't felt in a long time. She had done it. She had taken a chance on herself, and it was paying off. The town that had once felt so foreign now felt like home, and for the first time in years, Lily felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be. The memories of her past still haunted her sometimes, but they didn't define her anymore. She was more than what had happened to her. She was stronger, braver, and ready for whatever the future held. With the support of the people around her, and the strength she had found within herself, Lily knew that she could handle anything life threw her way. And though the road ahead was still uncertain, she no longer feared it. She was moving forward, one step at a time, and for the first time in her life, she felt like she was truly free. Ignite your curiosity with a gripping tale of survival and empowerment in this powerful story of a young woman finding freedom from her abusive past. As she embarks on a journey of self-discovery, Lily's path intersects with the rough but compassionate world of the Hell Angels, where unexpected alliances are formed and courage is tested. In the midst of overcoming trauma and facing the past, this narrative explores themes of resilience and redemption. With each chapter, Lily's transformation mirrors the kind of fierce loyalty and brotherhood often seen in Hell Angel stories, as she learns to trust and rebuild her life, piece by piece. The impact of those who step up in times of crisis is truly felt, proving that even in the darkest times, hope and strength can rise from within. Hell Angel stories have often been about tough choices and the triumph of the human spirit, and this story continues in that tradition, highlighting Lily's growth as she faces her demons and stands strong against those who once controlled her. As the Hell Angel stories remind us, no one is ever truly alone when they choose to fight back. Witness Lily's transformation as she takes control of her future and confronts her fears, paving the way for a new chapter in her life, filled with the promise of a fresh start.